Montana Territory, September 1879. It was near midnight when Colson Zayne stepped into the livery stable behind the rusted-out saloon in Dry Creek and heard the soft sound of someone crying. He paused, boots crunching on straw. The horses stirred at his presence, but the hush that followed was not theirs. It came again, a sharp breath, then silence. He turned slowly, hand resting on the holster at his hip. "Who's there?" he said, voice low. Behind the last stall, tucked beneath a wool blanket and a pile of old saddlecloths, a girl no older than 20 sat curled tight in the corner. Her pale yellow dress was torn at the hem, dirt smudged across her cheek. Her eyes wide, sharp, and green locked with his. Colson took a careful step forward. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said. "You hiding from someone?" She stared at him, silent. He removed his hat. "Name's Colson Zayne. I just came in from the Sweetwater Range, looking to trade out my horse. I ain't part of any trouble." Her voice was hoarse. "My father tried to sell me." Colson froze. She sat up straighter, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. "He took me into the saloon, said I was fresh and worth good coin. Told the barkeep I was better than whiskey." Colson clenched his jaw. "Where is he now?" She looked down. "He left when no one bit. Said he'd come back when men drank enough to stop asking questions." "Your name?" She hesitated, then said, "Calla Ellison." "Well, Calla," he said, crouching near the edge of the stall, "I reckon you do not want him to find you again." She shook her head fast. Colson stood. He glanced toward the saloon's back wall, where lamp light flickered through the cracks in the wood. "I have coin," he said. "If I pay him off whatever he thinks he's owed for you, you walk free, and he has no reason to chase you." Calla blinked. "You would do that? I have seen men do far worse than what he tried. I figure this is the least I can do." She looked at him hard. "Why would you help?" Colson rubbed a hand along his jaw. "Because you should not be curled up in dirt, waiting to be dragged off by the man meant to protect you." She did not speak again, but her eyes followed him as he turned and walked out into the dark. It took under 10 minutes to find her father. He was drunk, laughing over a game of cards, boasting to 2 other men about what he planned to do with the money he would make off his daughter. Colson laid down $50 in gold coin on the table. "That buys her freedom. You take it and walk." The man blinked, slow and heavy. "That girl's mine, not anymore," Colson said. "Take the money and you never come near her again, or you can try something else." His hand hovered near the revolver at his hip. The silence around the table was thick. The father's eyes flicked from the gold to Colson's face, then back. He swiped the coin, stumbled backward, and spat at the floor. Colson turned away. By the time he returned to the stable, Calla had crawled out of her hiding spot and stood waiting with her arms wrapped around her chest. She looked at him like she did not know if she should trust him or run. "It's done," he said. "He took the money." She stared. "You really did it." Colson nodded. "You are free now." Something in her face broke at that. She stepped forward and then stopped, hands shaking. "I do not know where to go," she whispered. "Come with me," he said. "I have a ranch south of here, past the river bend. You can stay in the bunkhouse until you figure out what you want." She hesitated. "And you do not want anything from me?" Colson met her eyes. "No, Calla, I do not." She looked down, then back up at him. "Then I want to go." They rode out before dawn. She rode his pack horse, and he led them steady down the trail, away from Dry Creek and everything she had known. They reached the ranch by afternoon the next day. Colson had built it himself, 2 cabins, a barn and a corral nestled between the hills. Wide open sky above. No one around for miles. He showed her the bunkhouse, gave her fresh clothes from a trunk stored inside, and left her be. Over the next few days she kept to herself. Colson saw her at breakfast and again at supper, always quiet, always watching. But she started feeding the chickens without being asked. She swept the porch on her own. She patched the torn curtain in the barn window. She was quick, smart, and sharper than most. And he had not missed the way her hands trembled when she heard a man's raised voice, even if it was just him shouting a command to a mule. One evening, after supper, she stepped out onto the porch where he sat watching the sunset. "I want to earn my keep," she said. "I will not be a burden." Colson looked at her. "You are not. But I want to help," he nodded. "You can help in the garden or the barn, whatever suits you." She tilted her head, studying him. "You really are not like other men." Colson set down his tin cup. "I never wanted to be." A flicker of a smile touched her lips. It was the first time he had seen one. That night, as the wind moved soft through the pines, Colson lay in bed and thought of her smile. And for the first time in a long while, he felt something warm settle deep in his chest. Something he had not known he was missing. He did not know what it meant yet, but he knew he wanted her to smile again. By the second week, the raspberries behind the barn began to ripen. Calla took to gathering them just after dawn, baskets swinging lightly in her hand, skirts damp from the dew. She moved quiet, but not from fear any more like she was measuring the world differently, learning where she could place her weight without making it shift beneath her. Colson watched from the corral, elbow resting on the top rail as he waited for the gelding to settle under the saddle. The air carried a stillness that sat different than before, like something had turned inside the silence. "You ever pick berries before?" he asked without raising his voice. Calla didn't turn, but her answer came steady. "Not since I was small. Mama used to make vinegar out of them. Said it cured what whiskey couldn't." Colson adjusted the cinch. "Your mother's still living?" "No." Calla stood and tucked her harvest into the crook of her arm. "She passed after the last baby." He didn't make it either. He gave a short nod, not to fill the space, but because it was the only reply that felt right. She walked toward the porch, barefoot in the grass, and he noticed she held her shoulders higher than when she'd first arrived. That evening she knocked once on the cabin door before stepping inside, holding a small tin wrapped in a cloth. "I tried to bake," she said. "Couldn't find sugar, so I boiled down the berries." He took the tin without speaking and set it on the table. The crust was uneven, but it held together. He fetched 2 forks and sat across from her. Calla waited until he'd taken a bite, eyes narrowed slightly, lips parted just a little like she was bracing for disappointment. Colson chewed, swallowed, and leaned back. "You boiled the juice too long. It's tough around the edges." Her face fell. He reached for another bite. "But the middle's good, sweet. You got a knack for doing with what's on hand." She let out a breath, something between a laugh and a sigh. "I never had a chance to learn proper." "You learning now," he said. She looked down at her hands. Her fingers were red-stained from the berries. "The women in town," she said, "they used to whisper about me. Even before my father started drinking hard, said I was too quiet, didn't smile enough, that I'd never make a good wife." Colson wiped his mouth on his sleeve. "Folks talk when they don't know what else to do with themselves." "I used to think maybe they were right," she said, "that maybe I wasn't built for anything gentle." "You're not broken," he said. "You just been bent hard by the wind." Calla met his eyes then. There was something raw in her gaze, not fragile but stripped down, bare. She didn't look away. "You ever been married?" she asked. "No. Why not? Didn't find someone I could sit quiet with." She nodded, slow. "Quiet can be easy." He watched her for a long moment. "Not always." The lamp on the table flickered as the wind shifted outside. She didn't move to leave. "I don't know what parts of me are still mine," she said. "Feels like pieces got taken before I knew what they were." "You don't owe no one an answer for that," he said. She stood and gathered the tin. "I'll try again tomorrow, maybe with cornbread." He rose with her. "You don't have to keep baking." "I want to," she said. "I like watching you eat something I made." He didn't smile, but something softened in his voice. Then I'll be here." She nodded, stepped out into the dark, and closed the door behind her. He didn't light another lamp. Just stood there, the taste of raspberries still on his tongue, as the night settled in around him like a weight he didn't mind carrying. The first frost came early that year. Colson woke to a thin crust of ice on the water pail and crows thick in the sky, gliding low over the fields. He moved slow through morning chores, breath steaming in the cold, the ground snapping brittle beneath his boots. Calla had started wearing a shawl he found in an old trunk, faded blue wool, one corner patched with mismatched thread. She wrapped it around her shoulders with care, her hands steady now, the way a person moved when they'd learned not to flinch. That afternoon, Colson was mending a fence line where a cottonwood root had pushed the post loose. Calla crouched nearby, sorting bent nails from the straight ones, sleeves rolled to her elbows. "You always work alone?" she asked, not looking up. "Mostly," he said, hammer pausing mid-swing. "Had a partner once, Will Norris. We built the barn together. He took off south after the winter of '77. Why'd he leave? Got word his brother was dying in Kansas. Never came back." Calla leaned back on her heels. "You miss him," Colson set the hammer down. "He was quiet, like me. We didn't talk much, but work got done. That's hard to find." She pressed a nail into the dirt. "Most men I knew only talked, laughed loud, bragged louder, never did much of anything." He studied her face. "You think I'm too quiet?" "No," she said. "I think you listen." "That's rarer." They worked until the light turned gold and the air dipped colder. On the way back to the house, she asked, "You ever think about leaving here?" He shook his head. "Everything I need's on this land." "What about company? Don't you ever get tired of your own voice?" "I don't talk to hear myself." Calla smiled just a little and nudged his arm with her elbow. "That's plain enough." That night they ate by the hearth. She'd boiled stewed beans with dried sage she found near the creek. Afterward, she sat by the fire and stitched a tear in one of the work shirts he'd ripped hauling a jammed plow blade. Colson watched her from the kitchen corner, hands resting on the edge of the table. The lantern light caught in her hair, and for the first time she looked like she belonged to the room. "You got a mind for fixing," he said. She didn't glance up. "Mama used to say, if you can mend a hem, you can mend a heart." I never believed her. "What changed?" Calla tied off the thread and bit it clean. "You gave me time without asking for something back." Colson stepped closer, slow. "You think time's enough?" "I think it's a start," she said. "And I think I'd stay if you meant for me to." He didn't touch her, didn't move more than an inch, but his voice came low. "I built this place to be solid, not just the walls. I wouldn't ask you to stay unless I meant to hold the weight of it." She looked up at him, eyes steady. "Then ask." "I want you here," he said. "Not as a guest, not as someone passing through. I want you beside me." Calla stood, the shirt folded in her arms. "Then I'll stay." They didn't kiss, not yet, but something passed between them in that stillness, a vow unspoken but understood. Outside, the frost thickened. But inside, the house held its warmth. And for the first time, neither of them felt like they were waiting for something to break. The wind changed in mid-October. It blew harder from the north now and carried the smell of snow even though the sky was still clear. Colson patched the barn roof, while Calla stitched new lining into the quilt that had begun to thin across the bunkhouse bed. The air between them had shifted too, not in sudden ways, but in the way her footsteps lingered slower near the cabin door, and how his glance held a second longer when she turned from the stove. That morning, she brought him a cup of black chicory while he worked at the forge beside the barn. He took it, his hands blackened with soot, and she didn't flinch when their fingers brushed. "You ever think about going back?" he asked, eyes on the ember glow. She sat on the upturned crate across from him. "Back where?" "To wherever came before." I wouldn't find anything worth the road, she said. What was theirs not mine anymore. He nodded once, tapping the iron rod against the edge of the anvil. You're not looking over your shoulder these days. No, she said. I don't feel like I need to. The warmth from the forge cast long shadows across the dirt floor. She watched him shape the metal, slow and precise. You always work with your hands, she asked. Ever since I was old enough to hold a tool. My uncle taught me blacksmithing before I could read properly. She leaned forward, elbows on knees. You got kin still living, not close. Folks scattered, some buried. I've got this land. That's what I've held on to. Calla was quiet then. I never had land. Or anything that wouldn't be taken. Colson set the rod aside and turned to her. This place, it's not just mine anymore. You've made it different. She tilted her head, unsure. Different how? He looked straight at her. Feels like it breathes better. Like it's not just waiting for the next storm, she swallowed. I don't know what to do with that. Just stay, he said. Later that week, Colson returned from trading at the settlement 2 ridges over. He rode in with flour, seed potatoes, and a length of calico. The cloth was wrapped in plain brown paper. He handed it to her without speaking, then started unpacking the rest. Calla unfolded it on the table. The fabric was deep russet, the kind that would catch the light come spring. For a dress, he said as he stacked tins on the shelf. Didn't know what color you'd want, but it looked like something you could wear through both work and Sunday. She touched the edge of the cloth but didn't lift it. Why? You said you never had anything that was yours. I figured it's time you did. She looked at him, something unreadable in her expression, eyes darker than usual. I've never had a man do something kind without expecting something for it. Colson didn't turn. I'm not other men. No, she said, you're not. That night she didn't return to the bunkhouse. She stood at the cabin door after supper, shawl drawn close, and waited. Colson opened it without a word and stepped aside. Inside, she laid the folded fabric on the table, then faced him. I want to be here, she said. Not just because it's safe, because it feels like I was meant to be. He didn't move closer. He didn't need to. You are, he said. When she stepped into his arms, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't loud. It was the kind of closeness earned one quiet evening at a time, built with the same care he used in shaping timber or iron. Her head rested beneath his jaw, and his hand settled at the curve of her back like it had always known the place. Outside, the wind lifted again, but the cabin held steady. And for the first time in either of their lives, there wasn't anything left to run from. The snow came down heavy that winter, thick and wet, blanketing the hills in silence. The drifts clung to the fence posts and blurred the edges of the land until everything looked softened, like the world had drawn a breath and held it. Inside the cabin, the fire burned steady. Colson had moved the second cot from the bunkhouse days after Calla came to him in the doorway. It had been a quiet thing, the way they'd begun sharing the space, her sewing basket tucked beside his tools, his coat hung beside her shawl. No ceremony, just the slow weaving together of 2 lives that had once run separate. On a morning when the wind hadn't yet stirred, Calla stood at the window with her back to him, a length of chalk in her hand and a scrap of paper pinned to the sill. She traced the outline of something he couldn't tell what, but her brow was furrowed with the kind of attention she usually gave to mending seams. You drawing something? He asked from the table, where he was oiling the hinges off an old mule harness. Trying, she said without turning. I keep thinking about a greenhouse, something with glass panes and a stone wall on the north side to trap the heat. Colson leaned back, letting the harness fall slack in his hands. What would you grow? Herbs, mostly. Maybe tomatoes if I can get the seeds to take. I read about it once in a paper the school teacher left behind after she moved east. said they could coax green through the cold if they built the walls right. He stood slowly, wiping his hands, and joined her at the window. She didn't stop sketching. "We could start laying stone come spring," he said. "There's still good rock near the creek bed." Calla looked up at him, her hair pulled back with a strip of calico. "You mean it? You've made this land bloom already," he said. "I figure it's time to help it along." She reached for his hand, her fingers cool but certain. "You make it feel like I can build something that lasts. You already have." They spent the rest of the day inside, sorting seed sacks and boiling lye soap. Calla sang under her breath as she stirred the pot, a melody Colson didn't recognize but liked the sound of. He didn't ask what it was. Some things were better left to live unnamed between them. By February, the storm light changed. The hours stretched longer and the snow softened at the edges. One morning, Colson came in from the barn and found Calla kneeling on the floor, rolling out a strip of muslin across the boards. "What's that for?" he asked, setting down his gloves. "The wedding dress," she said, not looking up. "If I'm to be your wife, I mean to wear something I made with my own hands." Colson crossed to her and crouched low. "You sure?" "I am," she said. "Not because I need a name to stand on, but because I want to build the rest of my days with you." He touched her cheek, rough thumb against soft skin. "Then we'll marry come thaw." They wed beneath the cottonwoods once the ice broke, the creek running clear behind them. The preacher came from 3 valleys over, riding through slush and mud with a cracked Bible and a voice like gravel. Calla wore her russet dress, sleeves hemmed with lace she'd found tucked in a box Colson had forgotten he had. She stood tall beside him, her hand steady in his. There were no guests, just the wind and the trees and the land that had given them both a place to begin again. They said their vows with clear voices. No trembling, no need for anything more than what stood between them earned trust, quiet shelter, and days made honest. That night, Colson built up the fire high while Calla unpinned her hair, letting it fall loose down her back. She stood in the middle of the cabin, the light catching on her skin, and he crossed to her like a man who'd waited his whole life to arrive at that one moment. "I never thought I'd live to see a day this full," she whispered. He kissed her brow, then her mouth. "We've got 1,000 more to come." They made love slow, not out of caution but reverence, 2 people who had learned every inch of one another long before they ever touched. The seasons turned. Spring brought the greenhouse stone lifted one by one from the creek, glass salvaged from the shattered panes of an abandoned shop in town. Calla's herbs took root quickly, sprouting green against the warm dirt. She kept a journal of what grew and when, and Colson built her shelves for drying and sorting. By midsummer, she carried new life. She told him beneath the cottonwoods, her voice low but steady. "You sure?" he asked, though the answer was plain in her eyes. She nodded, one hand resting over her belly. "Our home's growing in more ways than one." Colson gathered her to him, heart full in a way he hadn't known it could swell. When the baby came under a waning moon in early March, it was a girl. Calla named her Lark, for the ones that sang even in the cold. Her hair was dark like Colson's, her mouth shaped like her mother's resolve. They built a cradle together. Calla lined it with a quilt she sewed from scraps of the russet dress, and Colson carved a lark into the headboard with the same care he gave to everything built by his hands. And so the days passed, not always easy, but always full. The land gave what it could, and they gave back in kind. There were late nights with colic, long days of mending fence and coaxing sprouts from dry earth. But there was laughter too quiet, steady, like water running smooth over rock. They never left the ranch, never needed to. Everything they wanted stood beneath that sky love built slow and lasting. The past, once sharp and heavy, faded behind them. What remained was the life they made, and it was good.